Hello and welcome. Today, we're diving into something that I know can sound pretty dry, land acquisition law. But stick with me here because it's actually a fascinating story about a really delicate balancing act. On one side, you've got a nation's need for progress, think huge new railway lines, and on the other, the rights of a single person. And our guide for this journey is the Railways Amendment Acts of 2008.
So let's just make this personal for a second. Imagine a notice shows up at your door. The government's planning a new railway. And guess what? The tracks are set to go right through your property. What happens next? What are your rights? What does the process even look like?
Well, that whole journey from that first notice to the final outcome is laid out in a very specific set of rules. For what are called special railway projects, this 2008 Act is the official playbook. It dictates every single step. Okay, so let's get into it. The moment the government decides it needs land for one of these special projects, the very first thing the law does is bring in a referee to oversee the whole thing. And that referee is called the competent authority. You can think of this person or body as the project's official manager. They're the central point of contact, and it's their job to run the show from start to finish. So, as a landowner, what's the very first thing you'd actually encounter? Well, it all kicks off with an official notice. This is basically the starting gun for the entire acquisition process. It all starts with something called a notice of intent. This is a public announcement that your land is on the list. Now, this notice gives the authorities the green light to come onto your property to do a survey. But, and this is a key protection right from the get-go, if their work causes any damage, they have to pay you for it. And a survey isn't just a quick look around. It can be pretty hands-on. We're talking about everything from taking measurements and testing the soil to actually digging or boring holes to make sure the ground can handle the new railway. Now, this is so important. You are not just a passive bystander in this. The law totally recognizes that you might have some valid concerns, so it builds in a formal window for you to make your voice heard. You get exactly 30 days. That's the clock that starts ticking from the moment that first notice is issued. You have 30 days to get your objections in writing. And this isn't about just sending a letter off into some black hole. The competent authority is legally required to give you a hearing. They have to genuinely listen to and consider your case. It's a mandatory part of due process. Right. So once all those objections are heard and a final decision is made, the process moves to its next big formal stage. The government can now issue what's called the Declaration of Acquisition. And this is where things get really serious. This declaration is incredibly powerful. The law says the land then vests absolutely in the central government, free from all encumbrances. Now, that legal phrase is key. It means the government gets a totally clean title. It's like hitting a reset button. Any previous loans, legal fights, or other claims on that land are wiped clean. But they can't drag this out forever. There's a time limit. This official declaration has to be issued within 1 year of that very first notice. The only way that clock stops ticking is if a court steps in and puts the whole thing on hold. So, legally, the government now owns the land. But that, of course, brings up the million-dollar question for the owner. When do I get paid? And the law has a critical safeguard built in right here. So the declaration is out there. Can the government just show up with the bulldozers and take over? The answer is a clear and simple no. And right here, you can see that core balance in the law perfectly. The government gets the legal power. It owns the land on paper, but the landowner gets a crucial physical protection. They cannot take your land until the money is on the table. The law makes this absolutely crystal clear. First, the compensation amount gets figured out based on market value. Then, and this is the most important part, that full amount must be deposited with a competent authority. Only after that money is confirmed to be in the account can the government actually take physical possession. And even after the money is safely deposited, it's not like they can kick you out the next day. The owner is then given a 60-day notice to actually move out. This whole idea is what prevents a nightmare scenario where a landowner is left hanging, holding a legal notice but with no money in sight. The payment has to be secured before possession changes hands. It's one of the single most important protections in this entire act. Now, you might think the story's over, right? The land is acquired, the compensation is paid, the end. But the law has one final and frankly pretty surprising twist to make sure things are fair even years down the line. It's this really unique provision that looks into the future. It asks a what-if question you would just never expect a law like this to even consider. And here's the question. What if the government takes your land for a public purpose, but then later on, it transfers that land to a private company, and that company sells it for a massive profit? Does the original owner, who sold it at the fair market value at the time, get anything? The answer, amazingly, is yes. If that exact scenario plays out, a staggering 80% of that profit has to be paid back to the original landowner or their family. It is a remarkable, long-term fairness check, specifically designed to stop anyone from profiteering off land that was acquired for the public. So from that very first notice and your right to object to the absolute rule of payment before possession, and all the way to that incredible 80% profit-sharing rule, this law maps out a detailed, step-by-step process. It's this constant push and pull, trying to balance the immense power of the state with the rights of the individual. So I'll leave you with this to chew on. Of all these rules we've walked through, which one do you think is the single most important safeguard for a citizen? Thanks for joining us.